seats. Come on over. Thanks for coming. Thanks. Y'all look beautiful tonight. Everyone's just like chilling. Welcome, everyone. Hi, y'all. Happy Bi Week. I'm Chantel Matiola. I am one of the co-chairs of the Bi Plus ERG Employee Resource Group here at HRC.
And I'm Helen. I am Chantel's partner in crime and on HRC's digital team. And I use she, her, hers.
Use she, her, hers as well. Well, welcome to an evening to celebrate Bisexual Awareness Week. We're so happy to have a room full of all of these beautiful faces, bi, pan, queer, fluid, and all of our beautiful allies as well. I will say that this evening has been something that our ERG has been looking forward to for probably since it ended last year. So thank you again for joining us. I'm going to pass it off to Helen now.
Our ERG's mission is to denounce bi erasure and increase Bi Plus visibility through education and advocacy. We're also a space to build community, and that's exactly what we aim to do here tonight with all of you. This event is very special because it's led by all Bi Plus folks for Bi Plus folks, and we're so excited to have allies here too.
So we have a pretty jam-packed evening. And as I'm looking around, I see some faces in the room that were here last year, so thanks for showing up again. But let's just give you a quick overview of what the night's going to entail. So Catalina Hadfield from HRC Foundation is going to pop up here and take a deep dive into the recently, as of today, launched Bi Plus Youth Report. And then HRC's Deputy Secretary, Elliot Kozic, is going to come up and lead a inspiring panel with some amazing folks that they'll introduce in a bit. But that's focused on Bi Plus folks in the media. We've seen a ton of people come out this past year, increasing the visibility of our community, and here we are to celebrate it.
So without further ado, let's celebrate 20 by Teen and let's get started. Thank you all so much.
Come on up, Catalina.
Hi, y'all. Thank you for coming tonight. So my name's Catalina Hadfield. I'm on the Public Education and Research team with the Human Rights Campaign Foundation, and I'm here to show you all our inaugural 2019 Bi Plus Youth Report. We are super excited to have this report. It's one of the first things of its kind. So I'm going to dive in first to a little bit of background about what this research covers. So this research is based on Human Rights Campaign and University of Connecticut's 2017 youth survey. We have about 17,000 people who responded to this survey, 17,000 young people. So that's young people aged 13 to 17. That's a lot of people. About 9,000 of those folks were Bi Plus youth. That's over half of our sample. So this is a gigantic contingent of the youth that responded to this survey. Just also some quick stats from other research. About 8% of youth aged 13 to 17 in the US, that's about 2 million youth, identify as Bi Plus. This is from data that we analyzed from the CDC. Also, about 62% of the adult LGBTQ population is Bi Plus. This is according to internal analysis of the General Social Survey. So as you can see, Bi Plus folks are some of the largest contingents of LGBTQ people, but they're sadly some of the most underrepresented and underserved. Also, a quick note about research that we always like to give is that Research just confirms things that most of the time we already know. We already have the lived experiences that this research backs up. However, it's super important that we have this research because it helps us elevate our platform and show other people that we are here and we exist and we are worth considering. So, yes, claps for research. Here is some of our most interesting stats. I know it might be a little hard to read, but one of the most striking things that we found from this survey and from our analysis is that bi+ youth are far less likely to be out about their identities in their lives compared to gay and lesbian youth. This is being out with family, with friends, with doctors, with teachers, with peers, all different groups of people. 29% of gay and lesbian youth reported being out to their parents and family, while only 19% of bi youth reported being out to their parents or family. That's a huge disparity. If you want to take a closer look at all these different stats, we have a lot of printed copies of the bi+ youth report for you to grab. I have to kind of go quickly, so I'm going to be whizzing through these. So if you want to look at more, please grab a report or look online. Here are some more stats. These are about family mental health in school. So just a few of these, I'll read them out. 69% of bi+ youth hear their families make negative comments about LGBTQ people. 87% of bi+ youth rate their average stress level as 5 or higher on a 1 to 10 scale. 1 in 4 bi+ youth always feels safe in the classroom. These are pretty shocking and pretty disappointing. We need to do better for our bi+ youth. Also a reminder that being bi+ doesn't exist in a vacuum. A lot of folks hold other different intersecting identities. So we also did some analysis on bi+ youth of color. And unfortunately, it looks like only 11% of bi+ youth of color, according to our research, believe that their racial and ethnic group is regarded positively or very positively in the United States. In addition, 87% of bi+ youth of color report that racism has impacted their life experience. That's way too many. We also did some analysis of bi+ youth who identified as transgender and or gender expansive. 58% of the transgender and gender expansive youth who replied to this survey identified as bi+. Again, that's over half. That's a huge proportion. However, more than 75% of gender expansive bi+ youth say that they can't always use the restroom that best reflects their gender identity in school. And 35% are always called by their true name at school. We need to do better for all of our bi+ youth holding multiple different identities. We also analyze a bit of qualitative data, which means quotes, basically. So I have a couple here, and I'll read one out loud. I feel unable to share my sexual orientation because I often hear that bisexual people need to, quote, just pick one. And I, as a young woman, am often sexualized for liking girls as well as boys. This is a quote from a youth that responded to our survey. We had so many quotes like this of folks feeling like they were not able to express their authentic selves because of other people's perceptions of them. So this was a lot of kind of sad, heavy information. So what can we all do, as many of us are adults and many of us are bi+ adults? What can we do to help elevate and make the world better for bi+ youth? The report has a few different recommendations. One of the biggest one is to elevate bi+ narratives, helping just represent bi+ people all across different media and platforms is really, really important and helps show people that their identities are valid. A few others are expanding opportunities and resources for parents of bi+ youth, for preventing erasure of bi+ communities when discussing LGBTQ issues, educating yourself and helping educate others about bi+ issues, and letting youth define themselves. Every adult can play a role in changing the landscape for bi+ youth, and it's really important that we never forget that. So, speaking of visibility and elevating bi+ narratives, we now have an awesome video coming from Alex Costello on our research team. On our video team. I'm the research team. I just really love research, okay? We have this great video now, so please watch it and enjoy.
thought women were beautiful. I also thought that men were beautiful.
Do you like girls and boys? Just girls or just boys?
Yeah, I like whoever loves me.
Even though there's LGBT, the B is often not heard from.
I am bisexual. I find boys attractive as well as girls.
People are fascinated by pansexuality. I'm not gay, I'm not straight, I'm not bisexual.
The nation's first openly bisexual governor.
Bisexuality.
In most recent years, we've seen bisexual communities start using the Bi Plus. So the Bi Plus is encompassing of all the various unique labels within the bisexual community.
I identify as queer and bisexual.
All right, now we're going to be switching over into the panel. So can I welcome up all the panelists and Elliot?
Yeah. Oh. Our setup is fluid, people. All right, happy 20 by teen, y'all. So I'm Elliot Kozich. My pronouns are they, them, theirs. I'm the Deputy Press Secretary for the Human Rights Campaign, and I'm like really stoked for this panel. So I'm going to start off by introducing our fantastic panelists. We did have one panelist you'll see in your program who isn't up. So Mateo de la Torre from the National Center for Trans Equality sends his love. He was unfortunately not able to join us. But we do have a really fantastic panelist, Charles Gerard, who is the digital strategist for the National Center for Trans Equality. And then we also have Khadija Khan. Cheers, cheers. And Charlie's pronouns are he, him. Khadija's are she, hers. And Khadija is Advocate for Youth's Muslim and International Youth Leadership Council's coordinator. Next, we have HRC's owns Helen Partial, pronouns she, hers. And we also have Bisexual Chatou, they, them, who is a cast member on season 8 of MTV's hit show, Are You the One? And spoiler alert, fresh off a fantastic win. So I'm going to give each panelist a little bit of time to introduce themselves and their work. So Charlie, if you want to.
2 microphones. Sure. Okay. Oh, no, this isn't on. Oh, no. Oh, this one's on. Great. Hey, my name is Charles Gerard. I see him, his pronouns. And yeah, I'm a digital strategist at the National Center for Transgender Equality. Also used to work here. And I used to be on the Bi-ERG. Yeah. But one of my jobs is to, of course, elevate the voices of trans people. But as you may already know, bisexual people make up, well, folks, the trans community, 30% of the trans community identifies as bi or pan. And then when you add in queer, it's about 50%, which is amazing, personally, as a trans and bi person. And so I get the pleasure of elevating trans voices at my job, but also bi voices. And there's obviously a huge overlap. That's what I'm going to say. Great.
Yeah, okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Khadija Khan, and I work at Advocates for Youth. Advocates for Youth is a partner organization with HRC, and we are a youth-serving sexual health and reproductive rights nonprofit. We work both domestically and internationally, and councils that focus on young queer and trans youth of color, on young women of color, on folks working on Title IX rights, all kind of runs the gamut. And the two councils that I'm lucky enough to coordinate is the International Youth Leadership Council, which is a group of DC college students working for reproductive justice in the Global South, and the Muslim Youth Leadership Council, which is an exciting project that we started about 3 years ago with my colleague Oruj Arshad, and it's a group of 20 young queer and trans Muslims from across the U.S., and it's been a really special opportunity, and excited to talk to you all more about it. So thank you.
So like y'all have heard a couple times now, I'm Helen. I am the digital media manager at HRC, and I also have the honor of being the co-chair of HRC's BI+ Employee Resource Group, or as we like to call ourselves sometimes, the Big BI+ fam. And my favorite thing about my work here is really being able to tell the stories of my community and really elevate the stories that people aren't hearing as much. And how do we show how we're all living and thriving and living our best lives?
Hello, everyone. I am Basit. I am a Brooklyn-based artist, activist, inspiration leader. I make music, and I have been basically repping the bi community my whole life, as we do. But I recently had the privilege of being on Are You the One on TV, and it was a really experience. I made some incredible memories and some lifelong relationships. And I also got to do something that I have always just wanted to see my whole life, which was to see the bi community represented in a large platform. You know what I'm saying? So, like, as a person of color, as a gender non-conforming person, my pronouns are them, they. So, like, as someone who I've all my life, I've just wanted to see myself represented just in the slightest bit, to then not only see myself represented, but be the representation that I wanted to see, has been just such a life-changing opportunity, and I am so grateful because it's brought me here to all of you. So thank you for having me. Oh yes, and my music is under Dion Slow, who is my drag persona. She's the Sasha Fierce to my Beyonce.
Awesome. So a couple of notes before we get started. To begin, we are streaming on Facebook Live right now. So everyone say hi to Facebook.
Hi, Facebook.
Hi, Facebook. And then secondly, I got a quick flag just to make sure that we're not blowing out the eardrums of folks on Facebook to hold the mic out a little bit for panels folks. Sorry, Facebook. Say, well, we're very visible and very loud. So I guess to get started, I do want to talk about visibility because it is Bi Awareness Week, my favorite week of the year. Yes. And I think with the bi community, being visible is something that is oftentimes difficult for us. Sometimes we're seen as too gay to hang out with straight people, too straight to hang out with gay people. Both of those are obviously wrong. So what I'd love to kind of kick off with is, as the Bi+ community, how do you make sure that you're being visible both in LGBTQ and outside of LGBTQ spaces? And anyone can jump off.
I can start. I will take that initiative. I think for me, as I've come into my own as a bi+ person and as a bi activist, it's about carrying my community with me in whatever space I go. So something as loud as this t-shirt that I'm wearing right now, which you can buy on shop.hrc.org or at our table in the corner for the shameless plug, or something as small as this ring, which you probably can't see on Facebook, but it's the bi flag. And it's just something for me that's a little small token that reminds me of who I am and my big bi family that I'm a part of.
I think for me, I've always felt that there were certain ways that we were supposed to look as queer people, and we were always told that, you know, if you were super flamboyant, you're this, or if you're super mask or butch, you're that. And I think the more comfortable that I've been with myself and the more comfortable that I have been just like expressing myself without thinking about what other people want me to be or how other people perceive me, the more I feel I represent what the bi+ community is about. We're not supposed to fit into any labels. We're supposed to break down labels, break down barriers, and be the representation we want to see in a relationship and the representation we want to see like within our community. So, yeah, I kind of feel like the best thing that I can do and that we all can do to kind of represent our queer community is to be authentically ourselves and not try to be anything that anybody else wants us to be, because that freedom is what allows us to like and love whoever we want to like or love.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think what was an important sort of realization for me is that the LGBTQ community doesn't necessarily exist outside of homophobia and outside of the gender binary, which should be like duh, but you kind of think as a young person, once you find a community and you're part of it, that you're like good to go and that there's not going to be any issues when it comes to what your sexual orientation or gender identity might be. So I think it's an unfortunate thing that a lot of the trauma almost and issues that come up for a lot of bi folks is within the LGBTQ community, which I'm sure we'll speak more about. But I think it's also an opportunity, like you said, to push back on the gender binary and push back on people's ideas of these boxes that don't really necessarily exist. So yeah, I think just speaking up and having more visibility, especially for communities where there's like very to little any type of visibility. So yeah.
I think that a large part of being bi is that people view who you are based upon who you're holding hands with. Yeah, so many nods. And so I think that for me, I'm often trying to find the balance of being vocal about being bi without like being too vocal, whatever that means, because I have other aspects about my personality too that I think are important. But I do want to make sure that folks know I'm bi, because if they don't, then we continue to be invisible.
And I think that idea of being invisible is something that's pretty salient with, I'm sure, many folks in this room, because I think very often the bi community is just erased from the entire photo. We look at the beauty of our queer community and, oftentimes we're really only seeing the L, the G, sometimes the T, oftentimes not the B. And I would love to kind of get y'all's perspective if you have kind of a personal experience with that, with kind of feeling that erasure, where it was, and kind of if you were able to step up in that time and kind of do something about it, what were you able to do?
Yeah, I feel like I have a pretty palpable example that's pretty recent for me. So like on this show that I was on MTV, my first like connection outside of like the main connection that I ended up having was with a person who identified as a female identifying person, and we were very close throughout the entirety of the entire process. And like even to this day, like she was just at my house in Brooklyn. She came and visited, but like we watched back the show and they showed a little bit of that connection. I'm talking about Kylie, if anybody watches the show. But they showed a little bit of that connection. I'm glad we got some diehard fans. But they showed a little bit of that connection in the very beginning, and then it was almost as if we never spoke to each other again for the rest of the show. And I feel like that example like makes so much, it reflects so much of my dating history as well. Like I feel like once I kind of made it clear that I had no restrictions when it comes to the person that I can fall in love with, and I have no restrictions in terms of just like any boxes that I hold my identity in, that people will still impose their restrictions on you. Even people like who are hypothetically making a reality TV show will impose those restrictions on you, and it can cause people to form ideas about you. So like one thing that a lot of us feared being on the show was that we went through so much like vetting to be sure that we were attracted to who we say we're attracted to, and we still were in fear that like our sexuality was going to be like devalidated because we didn't know whose hands that decision was in. So it's a tricky situation. I think my best way that I can navigate that is by honoring those relationships and like disregarding how people receive them or perceive them. Like Kylie and I are very close. Like it didn't change what our relationship was in the house because they didn't air it. It just changed what you got to see. So I think like the best thing, or if I had to give advice to that, it would be to just honor your relationships and honor and like respect the person that you are and respect the people that you keep close to you, and the rest will speak for itself.
I think for me, I came to work at HRC and I wasn't fully out as bisexual. I hadn't told my parents, I hadn't told my family, and I was really looking for a place to kind of find the tools to really claim who I was. And I was out at lunch with my mentor because I started here as an intern fresh out of college. And I was using very gender neutral pronouns because she was asking me, she was like, so who are you dating right now? Who are you interested in? Trying to feel me out. And I kept saying they, and she straight up asked me at one point, she goes, are you bisexual? You can say it. It's okay. I am too. And that was the first time for me I'd really seen someone who was like the quote unquote like adult that we all strive to be, that I don't know that I am in this moment, but who was proudly owning her truth as exactly authentically who she was. And for me, that was the real turning point, because I saw someone in this queer space who felt like me, who loved like me. And it was honestly life-changing.
And I think having that community, Helen, I'm really glad that you kind of shared the needs for that, because I think because we deal with so much erasure, sometimes within and sometimes outside of this community, we know that it affects us. HRC's research shows the health disparities, and I want to put a warning on this. We are going to talk about some mental health aspects. If you need to get up and leave, please do. But we know that the LGBTQ community in general, but especially the bi+ community, we face higher rates of depression, anxiety, suicidality, and a whole host of other like health consequences. So I'd love to kind of get y'all's perspective on maybe why that is, or what we as a movement can be doing to combat that.
I'll take this one. So in my work specifically with Muslim LGBTQ youth, it's been a really interesting thing to work through some folks grappling with bisexuality, because, you know, when you have this barrier already to coming out, which is people assuming that you are actually gay or you're actually lesbian and you just don't want to fully come out, that's a lot of issues that young people run into. I ran into myself, you know? And it's really extremely invalidating, and I think adds another layer to the general widespread confusion that young people experience as not only being young, but as also, you know, exploring your sexuality. And I think when you add another layer of being within a community that doesn't necessarily have the language to engage with concepts of like LGBTQ stuff, and in the Muslim community, things are still very binary, as they are in most communities and with most parents and aunties and uncles and stuff. And I know for quite a few young people that there's this feeling of, well, why would I go through everything to come out to my parents if I end up with someone of the opposite gender? And then there's that more pressure to possibly lean one way or another, which I think compounds to people's mental health struggles. And then additionally, there's also higher risks for bisexual people, trigger warning for violence and sexual health, higher rates of violence, and both within and outside of the LGBTQ community, people feeling like they have certain rights to your body and can make you one way or another, which is an awful way to think about these things. But additionally, young people face higher rates in the bi community of STDs and HIV because you have, compounding risk with being with both genders. And often there is a huge lack in research and a huge lack in resources for young people who are bisexual to understand what options they have when it comes to their sexual health and contraception. And so, yeah, it's a lot, man. It's a lot.
I think that one thing that I have noticed is that, being bisexual as well as, being trans or as being lesbian or gay involves a lot of education of folks that you didn't know you were going to be doing that day. And I was reading a Twitter thread the other day, and I think that the topic was like, what is the worst advice you've ever gotten from a doctor? And a man was talking about how he had asked his doctor to go on PrEP because he's bi, and he was sleeping with men, and he thought that that was important for him. And the doctor said, well, since you're bi, why don't you just sleep with women instead? That audible gasp is what I did to myself while I was scrolling through Twitter. And that's, many people in this room probably have similar stories where you're just constantly, just tired, right? From, having to explain yourself. And there was a Washington Post, I think, piece kind of recently about someone who was in a relationship. I think that the crux was that they appeared to be opposite gender, and so people were often assuming that they were a straight couple. And I don't remember a lot about the article, but I remember the comments. I don't know why I did that, but most of the comments were like, so who cares? Like, why do I care as a person? I don't care about you. And I think that that's the problem, right? There are a lot of reasons to care. And maybe the article didn't do a good job explaining that. I don't remember, to be honest. But ultimately, people don't get why it's important, and that's what's, partly that stigma and, erasure is what's happening to us in terms of negative mental health outcomes. But I'm happy to be here and trying to fix that.
And I think it's not just about educating others. Sometimes we have to educate ourselves because there's not resources for us. And I say that as someone who went to Catholic school for 13 years. That time when middle school youth are supposed to be getting sexual health education, I had a book that was given to my parents and a class on chastity that was taught by a priest reading Bible verses. So as someone who was trying to figure out their own identity, I had nothing. I had very well-meaning but very heterosexual parents. And they didn't even have the tools themselves to know that I was a young queer kid looking to find who I was. And for me, it's exhausting sometimes even just to have to go teach yourself, let alone be able to teach others.
And I love that we're talking about kind of that self-education, because that kind of made me think of that, maybe this is dating myself, I don't know, Tumblr's kind of a thing, but I think about when I was figuring out my sexual orientation and to some degree my gender identity, I turned to the internet, I turned to Tumblr. I looked at so many memes, got a lot of interesting information, developed a really intense love for the show Sherlock, and ultimately just figured myself out. I mean,
We've all been there.
So I would kind of love to talk about kind of how we found those resources and those communities when we were starting to come out. Just because I know, we know nowadays that so many more teens are self-identifying as bi plus than even, 10 years ago when I was coming out. And unfortunately, we don't have Tumblr in the same way we used to. So how did you kind of find those resources when you were discovering who you were?
I would say for me, it was a sense of community, the first intimate or like the first relationship that I was in was with a cis woman, and she, like, I had not been physical with anyone at that time. I was like, it was high school, so like 17. And I think that she knew that I was queer, but like she knew that I didn't understand my queerness. And because there was this like vulnerability that she chose to deal with, like my queerness, I felt no pressure to be anything but like receptive to everything that she was giving me. And it made me not want to retreat into this like idea that like, oh, I was just attracted to men, or I was just attracted to, I was attracted to her, and I was attracted to what she was giving me, which was like an opportunity to be loved and seen. And I'm like to this day, I'm still like very close with this person. And I find that that's kind of how I build relationships. All of the relationships in my life, whether they be romantic or not, are with people who like really get a lot out of looking someone else in the eyes and being like, you're seen and you're seeing me, and like that's important to me. And because we're doing this for each other, like we can wake up tomorrow and it'll be a good day. You know what I mean?
Beautiful. So I recently had the opportunity to go to the Global LBQ Women's Conference. It was the first of its kind, and it was in Cape Town, South Africa. And we had a bi plus like breakout group, and it was packed. And and it was a really amazing experience to be with bi women from all over the world. But at the same time, we were also building community and, finding joy and support from one another, but also feeling validated in some of the struggles that we had gone through as bi people, particularly who work in the LGBTQ community, often feeling like your entire work can be invalidated if people find out that you're bisexual, because maybe you're like not gay enough or you've been lying or something like that. So that was a really unfortunate thing to see, that there was such a shared experience of biphobia literally all over the world, but that there's also so many people who are working to build visibility and build community. And so I think that community exactly, and like building positive relationships with people who see you similarly. So it was special.
Yeah, that community for me, it was one person. She was one of the first people I met when I started undergrad, 2 hours away from my family, very nervous little queer. She was unapologetically herself. She was in a relationship with this really awesome girl, and I was like, holy crap, she's just living her life. Like, it's okay to just be living your life. And she really helped me figure out me throughout college, and she's my best friend to this day. Like, we talk every day. I'm gonna send her the link to this when it's over and be like, watch this, I'm gonna make you cry. But she really, for me, was like that possibility model of like, this is someone who's my peer, and she's just unapologetically herself. And it's so important to have that community.
I don't have a personal story. I will say that I was rereading my journals recently from like middle school. It was kind of awkward. But I will say that the first sentence in my journal from 2003 was, I think I'm bisexual. I don't know how we got there, but we did. But I would love to share that. So I work at the National Center for Trans Equality, and I work on our social media. And so I was sharing a lot of Are You the One content, which I'm not just saying because you're here. I'm saying it because I watched it every week. But but like the community that follows our social loved it because as like one commenter said something like, I love that we can be just as messy as everybody else, you know? And I was like, yeah, like, right? But it's so important to see all kinds of different varieties of folks, right? I mean, like you could see, so I'm, as I mentioned, trans, and I didn't figure out I was trans until I was 17, and it wasn't because I had never heard the word trans before, it's because I'd never seen a trans man before, to my knowledge. And so, you know, maybe like someone looking at Are You the One isn't going to see themselves in Kylie, who we all know is a person now. But maybe they'll see themselves in somebody else. And so, you know, as much representation as we can, let's do it.
Yeah. I'm so excited about all of the new media and shows that are coming out that have bi people. You know, Are You the One? And Euphoria. I don't know if people watched Euphoria, but yo, that had me like, I was just in that world for like 2 weeks. I was like, just Euphoria is the only thing that can occupy my mind. But I think shows like that are so incredibly important because it shows young people just how normal being trans is, being bi is. And I remember the first time where I was like, oh, was Orange is the New Black. Like literally I was like in high school and I was like, oh, okay. Like, oh, this is interesting. So yeah, I think that media like... Anyways, I think that, media can do a lot for young people, and so it's super exciting to see these sort of things coming out, and it being more normalized for young people, too. You know, every year when the group population of young people that we work with at Advocates Youth gets younger, they also get, like, way more bi. I'm like, this is cool, you know? So it's exciting.
And I love that you're now shifting to media, because that's what I want to talk about. So I think we're seeing this like wave right now that you alluded to. We see amazing characters on these TV shows. We're seeing celebs. I mean, Janelle Monáe, Tessa Thompson. I'm just going to leave it there because like, wow. Like, we're truly in like a bisexual renaissance right now. And I'm so here for it. And I want to talk about when we see these moments happen, I always think about like my grandma, right? Like, I think about like, you know, when Jonathan Van Ness came out as non-binary, when Janelle Monáe came out as a free asshole. Okay. Y'all know the quote I'm about to say. But I think about, like, the conversation I'm definitely going to have with my grandma this week is going to be her saying, like, oh, I saw that nice person on that TV show, and you know what? They're like you. What would y'all say to my grandma when that happens? How do you harness these moments of pop culture to like educate the people around you or the people out in the Twitter sphere?
Well, I think the first thing that I would want to say is something along the lines of like, they're not like me, and that's the best part about it. Yeah. There's so many other people in this world, and that the opportunity for growth for each and every one of us is having the opportunity to be exposed to all the different types of people that exist, right? Like I've heard so many different stories from so many different bi plus people about how they got to where they're at with their sexuality, and believe it or not one of them were the same. Like, we all have our own experiences. We all have our own shared experience of having to come to terms with our sexuality and what that means in terms of the environment that we exist in. But the way that we got there is different because we are all different. Don't let me get into a conversation about astrology right now, because we are different.
I think for me, working in social media, it's about like, how can I ensure that people are seeing these really cool stories, right? And as someone who comes from a journalist background, how am I making sure that I'm also telling these really cool stories? Because like you said, none of our stories are the same. And I think that's the most powerful, amazing part about it. I wrote an article over the summer for Pride Month about how bi people have a place at Pride. Like, we are exactly as queer as we need to be to show up at a Pride. And I think, and that article, like, personal, like, point of pride, which I don't always take, but like, it was one of my most shared pieces I've ever written here, because none of our stories are the same, but we're all looking for that thing that connects us. And how can we find that and find each other?
And to kind of continue talking about these coming out stories, there is one story that I want to like specifically talk about because it's been something on my mind a lot recently. So Ryan Russell, who's an NFL free agent, recently came out as bi in this like truly moving piece that he wrote for ESPN. And this is a case that's really kind of sat with me because I think about the fact that, you know, Ryan Russell, he is a black bisexual man in the NFL. That is a hyper masculine, it's a place that we know doesn't often read as LGBTQ friendly. And I just think about like the bravery of that moment and how brave it was for him to come out. And so I wonder if we can talk maybe about what it means to be bi in a space that isn't always welcoming and kind of what that means for the people that are around you.
Totally. I feel like what we're learning is that in the NFL and sometimes just in like very hypermasculine spaces, that there's an element of danger that comes from sharing your sexuality because there's usually a lack of education to the people who want to alienate you for your sexuality. And I think that the only way to eliminate this danger is education, and by like really making a valiant effort of like showing people and like educating people like what is what, you know what I mean? So I think that like in his case, like he is extremely brave because there is a dangerous situation. Not only is he in a situation where there are people who may not be educated on like what like the bi plus community, but also like it's a physical sport, it's a contact sport, and like he risked so much by sharing that. I just would like to challenge like all of us at all times to like take the opportunity. I know it's not the job of the person who is marginalized to educate people around them, but I encourage you that if you have the capacity to do so, to just share with them that like I'm not like me being bi plus doesn't mean I'm attracted to you. me being bi plus doesn't mean I want you. It doesn't mean I'm trying to kick it with you. It doesn't even mean we need to be friends. It just means that I exist in the same way that you exist. And if we could all exist together in harmony, wouldn't the world be so much happier and easier to live in?
Being bi rocks.
Hell yeah, it does. Yeah. So I think a question that I do want to make sure that we address, just because, especially knowing that we're like live streaming right now, there could be, I hope, teens watching this and like as they're figuring themselves out, they just saw this random thing that they decided to see. And because coming out as a teenager, coming out as a young person, coming out as an adult is so hard. And I think it's just really cool that we have this like crew of bi plus people up here talking. And I want to give a moment where we can maybe send a message to anyone who is working through their identity, thinking about coming out, scared to come out. What would you share with them? What advice or just message would you want them to have?
I can start. I didn't come out until I was 20, and it's okay. Like if you're a teenager and you feel like you're not in the safe place, you're not in the right moment, it's not the right time for you. Like that's okay. I don't think and honestly, like we never finished coming out, but I wasn't out to my family until I was 22 or 23. Like it's a process and it takes time. And that's valid and that's real and that's okay.
So with the Muslim Youth Leadership Council, something that we talk a lot about is how in the Muslim community, maybe it's not a necessity that you come out. And not because you aren't fully who you are and you can't fully be who you feel inside, but that in a lot of ways coming out for young Muslims and for people from other countries, it can be a really Western sort of concept, and that it might not resonate fully with people, and often there's so much pressure within the LGBTQ community to come out, and if you're not out, and if you're not out to your parents, and you're not brave and proud, all these things, then you aren't actually queer, or you aren't actually bi, you aren't actually whatever you say you are. And so to any young folks who are maybe grappling with those sort of things, to know that it's not a bad thing, and you're not exactly who you feel you are if you decide to not come out, and that things take time and that processes look completely different. And also, if you're a young Muslim and you're watching this, we do have some brochures also over on the table, but two really amazing brochures that the Muslim Youth Leadership Council has created called I'm Muslim and I Might Not Be Straight, and I'm Muslim and My Gender Doesn't Fit Me, to kind of get at the idea of grappling with these questions. And they have been translated into Arabic, Urdu, and Finnish, strangely enough. And you can find them online at advocatesforyouth.org. And yeah.
One thing that I really hated hearing as a kid was be yourself. Because, like, what does that mean? Just like, as an adult, I'm still like not 100% sure what that means for myself. But, and I hate that I'm saying this, but my advice would be to be yourself in a way that feels safe and authentic. And, you know, I think that means like, yes, like, you know, maybe, you know, telling that person that you're interested in them, you know, that you like them, sure, maybe that's what that means. But also, like, you know, maybe not coming out to your family in the way that maybe makes the most sense to everyone around you. So, like, I am almost 30, and I have never actually said the word bisexual to my parents, I just realized. I've introduced them to people I'm dating of different genders, and I got the incredible opportunity to go to the White House and talk about being bisexual back when it was a lot more fun to be there. But, like, I still have never said, like, hey, I'm bi, and that's fine for my family. They don't really care. For a variety of reasons, the trans thing is more interesting, I think, to them. We're fine there, too. But anyway, I think that if you can just be yourself in the most authentic way possible, and whatever that looks like, and it's okay if that changes.
I agree. Be yourself. Like, you got to be yourself. You can't be anybody else, so you should be yourself. But furthermore, there are going to be people that are going to make you feel like you being yourself is wrong. And then I encourage you to remember that that is not your battle to fight. They are going through something because most likely they're seeing your freedom and your ability to understand who you are and understand like how you are able to love, and something in them is fighting. And so as difficult as it might be, you can give those people space or you can give those people love, but you cannot let those people take your light away, take your opportunity to be your full self away. You have to really, really compartmentalize how much energy you give to other people who don't have your best interest in their main focus. Because I say it all the time, but it's so true. Like, if you can't be there for yourself, you can't expect anyone else to be there for you. So you have to be there for yourself. You have to put yourself first. Prioritize loving yourself before you prioritize loving anyone else. Period.
Okay. And kind of to end on a positive note, we are going to take questions for the audience, y'all, but I do want, and I will be quizzing, I will be writing this down. This is a panel about media. I would love if everyone could give a recommendation of a piece of music, movie, TV, book that you think every bi plus person should read. And I'll start. Stream Dion Slay.
Nice.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you said we're starting down there. Wait.
Wait.
Are we starting on me?
What is happening?
Why are you looking at me?
I want to start whoever
So
has
sorry.
the most exciting idea. Or the one that they already have in their head.
I have one in my head. So By Women Quarterly is a newsletter produced by Robin Oakes, who's a well-known community activist in the Bi Plus community. And she works solely off donations, from what I understand, to put out this newsletter of stories written by women and non-binary folks for bi women and non-binary folks. And it's always really powerful, and you should definitely check her out. And I love her dearly.
I love Kalani.
Yes.
That's all. Pretty much. I saw her at LA Pride like 3 years ago. It was amazing. But I think Kalani, especially, so she's a new mother, which is amazing. It's been a beautiful transition to see. But it was really like a lot of interesting conversation came up when Kalani got pregnant because, you know, she was out as like a queer person, and people were like, well, how can you get pregnant if you're a queer person? And we're like, okay. So I think that was an important like moment for bisexual people to be like, okay, yeah, this is like also a thing. So pretty much anything about Kalani, check out her new baby, but okay, but also, if you want to learn more about queer and bi Muslims, we are having a campaign called #MuslimAnd, which is about expanding common perceptions of who Muslim people are, focusing on queer Muslims. And it's a campaign that pretty much is on social media all the time, but we have a Muslimand Week of Action happening at the end of October. I think it's like October 29th through November 1st. We are looking for organizational partners. If you would like to partner with us, that would be amazing, but we're also going to be developing posters that will be sent out to LGBTQ resource centers around the country. So if you're interested in signing up for the Muslimand Week of Action, you'll receive our posters and our cute little brochures and stickers and stuff. So plug. Plug for that.
You should go last. It's not going to be me. But I, you know, in thinking about this question, you know, I mean, I could list off like all of the cool bi and pan and queer people that I you know, engage with via their really cool platforms, but like just like Twitter, you know, like Twitter and Tumblr and TikTok, you know, hashtags exist so that we can find communities.
Hashtag by Twitter.
Hashtag by Twitter. It's a thing. And, you know, I like I said, well, actually, maybe I didn't say this, but I mean, I figured out that I was trans by reading a trans man's story on I didn't say this, on LiveJournal. I know, taken aback. Yeah, I see some nods. But I mean, like, you know, there are bi people all around us. We just don't always know that they're around us. And there are so many different folks that you can engage with from the comfort of your own bed, bathtub, or toilet, depending on. That might not have been cool. All right, sorry.
So I'm not going to tell you to watch reruns of Are You the One Season 8, but watch them if you haven't seen them, especially. No, so what I actually just listened, so I'm a big podcaster. I love to podcast. And one of my favorite podcasts that I've like been binging for the last, like since they've basically started, is The Read. It's this podcast, these two POs, well, black, but both, one's bi plus, one's, I think, identifies as gay, but like they have such a wide range of topics that they talk about in popular culture, and they basically read, if we know the jargon, reading for filth, they're just reading pop culture for filth, and it's not only entertaining, it's informative, it also brings perspective that I feel doesn't get uplifted often enough, the perspective of queer black people. And I think that, yeah, it's just such a, it's all of that aside, it's entertaining as hell. Like just to listen to their perspective, what it's like to live in New York City, what it's like to exist as black queer people. And then also they have like a listener letter section where like people of all different sexualities and gender identities send in, and you get not only the entertaining perspective, but like just like such a rich idea of what it's like to exist as a queer person all over the country. So yeah, The Read is a good one, and just any like support black and queer POC like media in general, because it is always popping, in my opinion.
Fantastic. So thanks, y'all. This is going to be the main part of our panel. So we can start by giving just a heckin' big round of applause to this crew. Okay. And then I think we're going to take a brief moment. We're going to stop live streaming because we're going to open up for Q&A. And we definitely want folks to be able to ask whatever questions